Good evening. Thank you all for coming. It's so great to have such a big crowd in our beautiful outdoor art club. We're thrilled that you're all here tonight with us. I'm Lori Howard, program chair for tonight's program. And I just want to mention a couple of things. We have listening devices in case anybody needs them. They work with our microphones. So Julie, if you raise your hand, Julie would give one to you. And then also the AV team, and we thank them for their help tonight. They're going to be busy because Anne is hoping to speak a little bit and take a lot of your questions. So when you speak into the mic, we'd like you to speak right into it so we can hear you. And also we're recording this, so we want to make sure our people at home will, when they watch it, will be able to hear your questions. So tonight we're thrilled to have our own OAC member, Anne Killion, here with us as our speaker, and she's covered Bay Area sports for more than a quarter of a century. She's an award-winning columnist and a veteran of 13 Olympics. And I brought my Olympic banner from 1984 Los Angeles. It's an antique up there, so I'm talking about the Olympics. She's also been at several World Cups, the Tour de France, and countless Super Bowls, World Series, and NBA title runs. She's a native of Mill Valley and still lives here. And her first sports writing jobs were for the TAM News and the Mill Valley Record. She's also worked for the San Jose Mercury News, the Los Angeles Times, and Sports Illustrated. And she's been at the Chronicle since 2012. Anne is also a New York Times best-selling author. She co-wrote Solo, a memoir of hope with soccer star Hope Solo, and Throw Like a Girl with softball player Jenny Finch, and two middle grade books on soccer, Champions of Women's Soccer and Champions of Men's Soccer. I need to get those for my kids. And to top it all off, Anne was named California Sports Writer of the Year in 2014, 2017, and 2018. So it's my pleasure to welcome Anne Killion to the podium. Thank you.
I'm feeling nervous. Thank you for having me, and thank all of you for coming. I mean, did you not know there's a big Warriors-Lakers game? I'm here to tell you a little bit about my journey from Mill Valley to Mill Valley, and my path through the world of sports for the last 30 years. But what I really also want to do, as Lori said, is have a conversation, because that's what sports really is about. It's one of the real beauties of sports. It's a conversation starter. It's a lively topic of discussion. It's distraction when your 401k is vanishing before your very eyes. It is definitely something that brings people together in our fractured society in a way that very few other things do. You know, you go to a game and you see people from all political, ethnic, religious, geographic backgrounds, and people are kind of coming together to cheer, which it's a little bit of a safe space. Not if you're at a Philadelphia Eagles game, and not if you're talking about Barry Bonds' chances for the Hall of Fame. I can attest to that. But it is something that brings people together. And so I want us to have a conversation because, as almost always is the case, this is a great time in sports, right? As I just mentioned, the Warriors are playing the Lakers. If you guys have to sneak out and run across the street to some facility with a TV, I will not blame you. And they're going to be making a playoff run. The Giants' home opener is tomorrow, and there's a tremendous amount of excitement of the post-Farhan era, which, I think the new president of baseball operations is going to be a little more popular than the last one. And then the 49ers. The 49ers are, I have no idea. I have no idea what they're doing. They seem to be taking a break, but we'll find out. So anyway, please be ready with your questions. and about anything, about me, about the media, about sports, whatever you want to talk about. But I'll start with the first question that I've been asked the most over the past 30 years, which is why sports? And back in my early days, it was like, why does a girl want to cover sports? People are a little more politically correct now, and they probably in the 21st century know that that's kind of a lame question to ask, but it's still why sports? And here's the answer. Sports is a never-ending source of real-life drama. It's about human beings succeeding or failing in the spotlight, in real time. We don't know what's going to happen. There are villains, there are heroes, corruption, greed, lust, hatred, cheating, racism, sexism, all the great components of all the great dramas that have ever been told in our society. They're all at play in the world of sports. And one of the great compliments I get is I get a lot of people who say, I don't really read the sports section, but I like to read your column. And as I said, that's a great compliment, but it's also because my little secret is I don't really write about sports. I write about people who happen to be doing sporty things. And sports is just the lens through what I'm looking at. I like to say that I write about the intersection of sports and society. And what does that mean? It means, my sports writing career has paralleled the growth of women's sports, writing about the way Title IX and women athletes have shaped and changed our views of women, writing about the through line from Colin Kaepernick back to Tommy Smith and John Carlos in the 1968 Olympics. I mean, there's so much at play in the world of sports, and it's just a great topic to write about. So that's the answer. That's why. I grew up in Mill Valley, a very different Mill Valley than the one we have today. It was a place of creative thinkers, of hippies, of Volkswagen vans and bead stores like the Sundancer, which was right down the street. And bead stores is another name for head shop. And it was a very creative, free-flowing kind of place. My parents were not those people. My parents were much older. Some of you know my mom, who was a longtime member here, and who passed away in 2018. But my parents both, even though they weren't hippies, they very much encouraged their kids to pursue their creative impulses and dreams. There's some artwork in the building by my older brother Tom, who has become quite a well-known artist. And my creative pursuit was writing. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew it would have something to do with words. And when I had daydreams about like Hollywood, I didn't dream of being an actress, I dreamed of writing the screenplay. So we weren't a sporty household. My dad, with the exception of my dad, who was a huge sports fan. He was, when the Giants moved from New York, he was out there in the financial district on Montgomery Street in the ticker tape parade with my brother Tom on his shoulders, waving to Willie Mays. Some of my earliest memories are sitting on his lap, and he always had a transistor radio in his pocket broadcasting the Giants games from April until October. It was just always the sound of the Giants. I have two older brothers, but I was the one who ended up watching sports with my dad. It was kind of our way to bond. And as an adolescent, I found it was also kind of a way to argue without, again, kind of a safe space, He didn't like the A's, he hated the designated hitter. The A's were winning World Series, and they had mustaches and white cleats, and I thought they were cool. And so we'd argue about that. But early on, I learned that sports was something that could bring people together who might not otherwise be together, because I was an adolescent girl, and he was my older conservative dad. And I also realized early on just the drama of sports. I remember like watching Olga Korbut when I was a kid, and having goosebumps and getting teary-eyed when she had these spectacular performances. So I was always drawn to that passion. When I went to Tam High, my older brother Paul was the editor-in-chief of the Tam News. So he told me to join the Tam News, so I did. I didn't do what my parents said, but I usually did what my brother said. Our advisor was Dick Fraguglia, who was a super chill dude, very creative, little bit of a hippie. You could still find him on Wednesday nights at Marin Joe's playing jazz piano. Very cool guy, very much letting us do what we wanted as the staff. We were free-range kids, and he kind of gave us a lot of leash. And one of the things I wrote for the Tam News was, I'm sure many of you remember Cyrus McFadden's cereal that ran in the Pacific Sun, and all of our parents wanted to get it as soon as it came out, and everyone wanted to read it. I wrote a spoof on that called The Cereal, C-E-R-E-A-L, that was very lightly disguised characters who were my classmates, stories about what happened at parties, where people smoked pot on campus, hookups, which we didn't even know that term then, but it was, we got away with quite a bit at the Tam News. And to be honest, that's one of the places I found my writing voice, was how I could be kind of creative and draw people in. And I didn't know at the time that I was prepping to be a columnist, but when I think back on it, I kind of was. I also became the sports editor of the Tam News because no one else wanted to do it. But I did it. I also made a little bit of money writing for the Mill Valley Record. Never in a million years thinking I was laying any kind of groundwork for a career. I went off to UCLA to do that screenwriting thing. I was going to go to UCLA and go to film school and get ready for my Academy Award moment. That didn't happen. At UCLA, I lost my interest in the entertainment industry pretty quickly, and I graduated from college with a degree in communications and a degree in history, which the history degree is fantastic because journalism is really just writing history in real time. And I got a job with a PR firm in San Francisco. Writing press releases was not what I wanted to do for a living. I learned that fast. So I applied to journalism school. And I applied to one because I wanted to live in New York as a California kid. When I got into Columbia, I knew I was going to go. And before I left the PR firm, there was this important moment. We had a client, Sprint, which was a phone company. Long before there were cell phone companies, there was a breakup of AT&T, and there were all these competing little phone companies. And Sprint was sponsoring a race called the California Mile that went straight up California Street and ended at the Fairmont Hotel. It was a very unique kind of race, and it actually attracted some Olympians, some big name runners. One of them, Sebastian Coe, just lost out being the IOC president last week. So attracting real athletes meant we also attracted real sports writers. And my job was to set up the interviews with the sports writers, set up lunches where they could interview the athletes. And it was such an eye-opener to me because I've met some other journalists, and they seemed very serious, very kind of dour, and these sports writers, they were fun, they were funny, they were engaging, they clearly loved their job, and it just kind of lit a fire in me. I was like, that looks like something that would be super fun to do. So when I got to journalism school, a few months after that, that was in my brain, and I decided, it's better to pick a path than let a path be picked for you, and I decided my path was going to be being a sports writer. And, I was a kid, like I said, who grew up, in the 70s, women's lib, women pushing boundaries. I mean, all of that was kind of infused in me, especially growing up in a place like Mill Valley. So it was very appealing to me to do something that was not the norm for a woman. And it was not the norm. I wasn't the a pioneer. I wasn't the first wave of women sports writers, but I was kind of sliding right behind them on their coattails. At my time at Columbia, I actually wrote a paper on women in the business, and I met many of those pioneers. And again, I was struck by, wow, these women are strong, they're funny, they're badass, they don't take shit from anybody. I was in a sorority at UCLA, which I didn't really like, but I was like, this is the sorority I want to be in. This is the sorority that was made for me. So all these little experiences just made me think, this is going to be the career for me. My first job was at the LA Times, first in San Diego and then in Orange County, and I was there for over a year. Right off the bat, I got yelled at, I was sexually harassed, I was intimidated, I had things thrown at me in the locker room. I had all those female sports experiences that are kind of cliche, but they all were happening. But I also met great people. Some women had warned me that baseball players are the worst. You don't want to, just beware whenever you go in a baseball clubhouse, they're the biggest jerks. So my first time I'm in a baseball clubhouse, I'm steeling myself, trying to be brave, and I walk into the Padres clubhouse in San Diego, and the first guy I see says, "Hey, what are you doing? Who are you? I'm Tony Gwynn." And I'm like, "Oh, wait, you're not a jerk." Turns out my first interaction with what is well known as the nicest baseball player to ever roam the earth. God rest his soul. Excuse me while I take a sip of water. But I wanted to come back to the Bay Area. I'm not a SoCal girl. And so I took a job at the San Jose Mercury News, covering preps, covering high schools, which was not my dream job, but I figured if I did a good job, I might get a promotion. And one of the high school kids I was covering was this kid in Fremont named Christy Yamaguchi. And she was a rising star in figure skating, and our Olympic reporter at the Mercury News had just moved on after the Seoul Olympics to do something else at the paper. So there was nobody naturally to cover, a natural fit to cover the skating, and they asked me if I would like to go to the US Figure Skating Nationals in Baltimore and cover Christy Yamaguchi. I was like, yes, yes, I would. Sounds better than covering a high school basketball game on a Thursday night. So I went, and Christy that was kind of her coming out party. She won a silver medal in singles. She and her partner, Rudy Galindo, won a gold in pairs, and they were headed to the Worlds. And my phone rings, still no cell phones, and my editor says, "Would you like to cover the World Championships in Paris?" And I said, "Well, yes, actually, yes, I would. That would be fantastic." So that experience is what really locked me in as a sports writer. It was the Olympic bug. Even it's, the World Championships are not the Olympics, but they're like the Olympics. It was Olympic sports where you're dealing with these athletes who have trained all their life for this one performance, this one moment. It's very dramatic. Figure skating is like a soap opera. It's just fantastic with sparkles too. And I caught the travel bug as well. So I got the Olympic bug and the travel bug all at once, and I realized, wow, I can write these kind of stories and travel the world. This is the job for me. And over the past several decades, while sometimes there are bad days and sometimes you get kind of frustrated, and I gotta say those two things definitely have kept me going through some of the rougher times. One of the Olympics, however, that I did not cover was the one where Christy Yamaguchi won her gold medal. After covering everything up all through her world championships and everything, that whole cycle, I had a 10-month-old. And so, maybe it was better I stayed home with him. But the interesting thing, especially from my vantage point now, is that my male editors decided that I couldn't go to the Olympics because I had a baby. So they made that decision without talking to me about it at all, without saying, "What do you think? Do you think you could do it?" So that that's kind of a sore spot. But anyway, Connor was great. I was a mom with a 10-month-old sitting on my couch watching Cristiano Ronaldo win a gold medal. My Olympic stint started with Lillehammer in 1994, which of course was another fabulous figure skating. Talk about getting addicted to the Olympics right off the bat. That was Tanya and Nancy. I mean, nothing could be better than that, right? Doing this job and having kids was a very interesting challenge a lot of the time. Like I said, I wasn't a pioneer of women in sports writing, but I was definitely a pioneer of working moms in sports writing. I didn't have any role models. The women that I knew who did the job either didn't have kids, didn't want kids, or if they decided they wanted kids, they moved to a different part of the newspaper, something that had less travel. So I, tried very hard to be both, as working moms do, tried to do both as best I could, probably did neither very well. But it's one of the reasons I'm here back in Mill Valley is my ex-husband, he was from Mill Valley as well. All sets of grandparents were here. We moved back here. It just made it much easier for my kids when I was traveling. And, my kids got a really great world education. They did a lot of traveling. The family would come either at the beginning of an Olympics and we'd travel around, and then they'd leave when the games would start, or they'd come at the end of an Olympics and we'd travel after. We spent the summer of '98 in Paris for the World Cup in France. It was, they didn't suffer too much. It would be hard, though, to cover the NBA or Major League Baseball as a mom with kids. There's too much travel, there's too many games. So my first stint as a beat writer, my real only stint as a beat writer was covering 49ers. And the NFL is much more as a much more reasonable travel schedule, one game a week, that kind of thing. And of course, my little secret was I'd be like, oh, I'm sorry, mommy has to go to Atlanta or Seattle. And then I'd get in my hotel room and I'd be like, yeah, I'm all by myself in a hotel room. My kids have funny stories about my job. My daughter likes to tell the story of coming in the house one day, and my mom was on the phone screaming at Lance Armstrong. That's a little bit of an exaggeration. We were having a very lively discussion about whether never testing positive for performance-enhancing drugs meant you never did them. You can imagine I had one opinion and he had another. My son has a memory when he was a little guy outside the Candlestick Clubhouse. Willie Mays was sitting there and he goes, hey you, aren't you a little short to be a sports writer? And my kid started laughing so hard he almost fell on the floor. Willie was great with kids. Willie liked kids a lot better than he liked grown-ups. Over the years, as you can imagine, I've dealt with a lot of famous people, some trying to intimidate me. When I was very young, young in the business, I went to the Raiders training camp down in Oxnard, and I'd never met Al Davis. And I wanted to do a story on Marcus Allen, who was one of the great running backs in football, but Davis wasn't playing him because he didn't like him, which was just weird. So I naively sidled up to Al on the sideline of practice, and I'm like, hi, Mr. Davis, my name's Ian Killion, and he's like, he just gives me this side eye, and I said, can I ask you how come Marcus Allen doesn't get any playing time? And he just looked at me like, he just gave me a death stare and said, do you want to be my friend? And I was like, and I mean, of course the right answer was no, I don't want to be your friend. I just want you to answer my question. But I was pretty young and just kind of tongue-tied at the time. Working on that same story, trying to get some information, I called one of Marcus Allen's best friends, O.J. Simpson. This was pre-double murder O.J. Simpson, NFL commentator, and I was in a hotel, and I called and left my number, and he called back on my hotel phone, still no cell phones, and I wish I'd had some way to keep this recording because it was so funny. And it's the juice. Like, who says that? One cell phone recording one recording that I have kept, because now we're in the age of cell phones and it's on my cell phone, is the late great Joe Morgan calling me to say that he enjoyed a column that I'd written about keeping steroid players out of the Hall of Fame. And as a Hall of Famer himself, he felt very strongly that players who had used steroids should not be in the Hall of Fame. And I keep that on my phone because, as I've kind of alluded to before, this is a hot topic with a lot of people in this area. And if people are super mean to me, I always want to say, Joe Morgan might know a little bit more than you do. So you, the guy in the Barry Bonds jersey. So anyway, I do keep that. What I like the best about my job is that it's different every day. It's completely unpredictable. Tomorrow I'll be at Oracle at the ballpark for opening day. Sunday I'll be at Chase Center where the Warriors will be playing the Rockets. I don't know where I'll be going in April for the Warriors. I mean, it's fun and unpredictable. It's not sitting behind a desk all the time. One example was last summer, which I call the best Olympics ever. The Paris Olympics was just this smorgasbord of different venues, different events. You never knew what was going to happen. Taking the metro back and forth across the city, trying to get from fencing to soccer to the track to judo to rugby to watching Steph Curry light the world on fire. It's just, it can be a very exhilarating experience covering all these events and not really knowing what's going to happen at any of them. Another thing I like about the Olympics is that it's one of the few stages where the women athletes are just as important, oftentimes more important than the male athletes. And after a steady diet of Major League Baseball and the NFL and the NBA, it's great to see these women's stories, to get to tell these women's stories. One of the things I've tried to do as a columnist is write regularly about women's sports. Like I said, my path as a sports writer has kind of paralleled the growth of women's sports. I got into the business just as women's collegiate sports were really kind of growing and being recognized. They'd been under the auspices of the NCAA for a couple of years, so they were more organized than they'd been in the early 80s. My first Summer Olympics was the Atlanta Olympics, which was the summer of the women. USA Women won all the golds and really, kind of took over the games. And they were all Title IX babies. They were all girls who had grown up with a chance to play in college, the first generation really with a chance to play in college because of Title IX. And then a few years after that was the 1999 World Cup, which was just this landmark event for women with something no one could have imagined a few years earlier. Women soccer players selling out NFL stadiums and just drawing these amazing ratings for a sport that America supposedly didn't even care about. So I've seen pro leagues launched, fail, it's expanded, contracted. It's exciting that we have two new pro women's teams here in the Bay Area. We have the Bay FC down in San Jose. They're in their second year. And then some of you might not even know what that is, but that's the Valkyries logo, the WNBA team that launches next month. So it's an exciting time in women's sports, but I gotta say I'm a little bit amused when I hear that there's this, women's sports are a thing, there's a revolution, it's like, yeah, it's been building, and some of us have been covering it for a long time, but it's for someone who's been covering women's sports, has been pushing to cover, to expand our coverage, it makes me happy to see. I have a young colleague, I call her my work daughter. She's Marissa Ingemi, and she's a full-time women's sports writer. And when I got in the business, that would have been like being ghettoized. Really? Go over there and cover women's sports. We're going to put you in that corner. But Marissa is kicking ass. She's taking names. She's winning prizes. She's at the Final Four right now, winning a Rising Star in basketball coverage prize. So it's fantastic. I have a sports editor who's a woman, and it makes a difference. I never have to argue that this is an important topic like I used to with some of my male editors, or I don't have to argue that we should spend money to cover certain women's teams. That used to be an argument that I used to have to engage in. So it's really a great transformation to kind of see how they've become a priority. The skills I need for my job are not particularly technical. To be a sports writer, you need to be curious. You need a sense of humor. You need a very thick skin. You need the ability to write pretty fast. Not suffering badly from hangovers is also big in my book. One thing that I think surprises a lot of people is that sports writers aren't fans. You have to give up your fandom, or you should. Most of us got into this business because we're fans. We love a team. We grew up in an area loving a team, got super into it, knew what everyone was doing. But once you get into the business, that kind of gets beaten out of you. There's an old saying, never meet your heroes because they're sure to disappoint you. That's true in the sports world, usually. There are exceptions. One of them is playing right now. And the same goes true with teams. Never get too close to your team because it's bound to disappoint you. You don't want to see how the sausage is made because it's ugly. And you don't, most sports teams are not run by most sports owners are not the nicest people in the world. Most of the teams are not run by the greatest people. So it's pretty easy to be a healthy skeptic. I still root for my alma mater. UCLA women are in the Final Four tomorrow. But I also, I would never want to cover them because I do have a bit of a rooting interest. I also can't stand the role they played in the demise of the Pac-12. And I root for Tam High, especially when my kids were playing sports there. But in my world, you mostly root for the story. I know most fans love an overtime game or a last-second shot that wins the game, a last-second touchdown. Oh, we sports writers, we don't want that. Especially when we're on deadline, because we've got a story, we've got a narrative, we've got it all figured out, we've got it all on our screen, and then something upends it completely, and we've got to start all over, and we might have to still file our story in about 20 minutes. So, we root for our story, and we also root for what's the best story. I mean, I wasn't rooting for Team USA, but I was definitely rooting for that Curry guy to make those threes in the gold medal game, because that was a way better story for me personally than if France had won. In addition to just rooting for the story, we root for people. When you've been in a business for 30 years, you've come across a lot of people, and the good ones stand out. And I still find myself, if there's someone that I've had good interactions with on another team, I'll pull for that person all the time. You would never have seen so many people. There was a very dedicated group of people in the Bay Area rooting for the Houston Astros a couple years ago to win the World Series. And they were sports writers who dealt with Dusty Baker, because he is not only one of the greatest people I've ever met in sports, but one of the greatest people I've ever met. And so to see him finally win a World Series as a manager was just a delight for all of us who have known him for a really long time. And the opposite is true as well. There are times where you're kind of like, oh, look at you fall on your face. Maybe that's because you were such a jerk to me a couple of years ago. That can sometimes be, you can get pleasure out of that as well. And I don't know, you might roll your eyes at it, but there's definitely bad things will happen to bad people in sports, and it's something called sports karma. So that's it's a very real thing. Anyway, that's enough about me and my journey. I would love very much to take your questions and see what parts of the sports world, the media world, the Mill Valley hippie world, whatever you'd like to talk about. Does anyone have a question?
Hi guys, so just to let you know, speak into the microphone and raise your hand if you have questions. And we're only two of us with two mics, so we'll do the best we can to get to everybody. I saw one down here.
Okay, this might be an interesting first question, but what are your opinions or even thoughts on transsexuals competing in women's sports? And I ask because honestly, I don't know what the heck to think.
Well, it is a very hot topic of discussion because people have made it one. It's, as someone has wisely said, it's, what's happening is a solution looking for a problem because it isn't really a problem. It is, I wrote about the San Jose State situation. They had a volleyball player on their team and who was outed by the captain who had been her former roommate, who had played with her for 2 years. This girl had been on the team. This was her third season. No one had ever said anything about it. The team was not very good. And all of a sudden, in an election year, it became this huge issue. And we went down and watched a game, and I tell you, you wouldn't know who we were talking about or anything. It was just like a normal volleyball game, except that there were like 6 protesters in the stands. I think that there is room for a very nuanced discussion about it. I think that people who feel that anyone who's gone through male puberty should not be able to play. I think that is a reasonable thing to say. I think that there are, but we're talking about a minuscule part of the population, and we're talking about just very, very extreme othering and bullying of very vulnerable kids. The highest suicide rate, I think by far of any group is transgender youth. It's a tough situation. I'll quote my friend Tara Vanderveer, who said, "If I had a daughter, I'd be way more worried about her going to school with an active shooter than going to playing sports with a transgender woman." There are 500 and I forgot what my figures were. There's almost 600,000 NCAA athletes, and I think they couldn't count more than 40, 10. Okay, 10. Anyway, it's not really an issue. But I know trans people who have very strong opinions about it. So it's not, but I think the discussion that's been happening is just so hysterical in many ways, and the bullying that comes out of it, it's discouraging to see. So I don't think we're having that nuanced discussion.
I hope you're not going to retire for a very long time. But when you do, will you be publishing a book of your stories? Because I think we could probably listen to your stories for days.
Oh, wow, that's very nice of you. Oh, sorry, I'm going to have to repeat the question. When I retire, I'm not sure when I will, but will I be publishing a book of my stories? I don't know. I might. One of my dreams has always been to write fiction. And I would really like to, but when you sit at your computer all day long, you don't want to really then be the person to go, oh, I have to spend 2 hours writing fiction. So I haven't really devoted as much time as I should, but I don't know what I'll do. Yeah.
Anne, thank you. First of all, you're a gift. And thank you for sharing your gift with all of us for the last 30 years plus.
Thank you.
I had a question about the transgender issue too, and you pretty much probably finished it, so you can say you said enough. But the question I had is, what do you think the main issues are in the controversy? Or do you think there's rumors or any movement in the country at all that you feel is ready to try and deal with those issues with respect for each other's opinion and compassion? Because I think it needs a great deal of compassion to figure out how to work through the issues.
I would agree. That's very, how do we deal with the transgender issues with compassion is the question. And I don't know, I mean, I do think what's happening, you know, California's kind of under attack, the school districts and the university system, and a lot of, like what happened at San Jose State, a lot of it was privacy issues, you know. You can't say that a kid has a disease. You can't say that a kid, what their sexual preference is. You can't, you know, so the San Jose State, you know, the lawsuit is saying they're protecting and they were, you know, they were trying to be compassionate and abiding by their privacy guidelines. I don't know. I just know that right now, my heart goes out to transgender kids, to their parents, to everyone who's trying to figure this out. Because what you just said, the word you just used, I don't think there's a lot of it right now in this country. I don't think there's a lot of compassion. And I do, you know, I mean, a lot of the track and field and swimming have already, there was a case that is the one thing everyone likes, you know, got lit up about was Leah Thompson, who was a Penn State swimmer, or Penn swimmer, swam as a male, took a couple years off, did hormone therapy, and came back and swam as a female, and won some races and made the NCAA championships. Also lost some races, and that was, you know, that was fairly egregious. And so there are bans in place now in the swimming governing body, and so schools are now following that. So that kind of case isn't happening again. Yeah, I don't have the answer, but it is a topic that really gets people going.
How are you dealing with and involving with the slow death of printed newspapers?
How am I dealing with the slow death of the printed newspaper? Well, I think the printed newspaper, I don't want to say it's completely dead, but it's pretty dead. It's changed things, obviously. I hope you all know that with your Chronicle print subscription, if you still have that, you also get sfchronicle.com, and you will have your stories instantly after a game, and much better stories as opposed to waiting 2 days now. Our deadlines are ridiculous. Our print deadlines are 3 o'clock, which means you can't get a day baseball game into the next day's paper. You can only get, like in my world, a 10 a.m. East Coast football game is the only thing you can get into the print paper. You know, I mean, my preference would be that we had a robust print product, but that's not the world, and most people, quite frankly, read on their tablets or their phones, and you know, we're happy to have them as customers. So it's definitely a very I was cleaning out my storage a couple years ago, and I came upon a box of newspapers, and the sports section of the Mercury News, like back in the 90s, was like 45 pages long. I mean, it was insane. Yeah, it's not like, and our staff is super small. You know, the Chronicle used to have a staff of about, I don't know, like maybe 30, and we're down to about 10. So it's a different world, but it's still fun.
You know, given that you've met a lot of famous athletes over the years, are there like 3 or 4 athletes that were just a joy to meet for whatever reason?
Yeah, he's playing right now. There are several who are a joy, and I would say that, you know, I used to have a different answer before 10 years ago, and now the number one on the list is definitely Steph. I mean, he is, you know, he is not only a joy to watch on the court, he is just an amazing person to deal with. He's so respectful of everyone. He's humble. He treats everyone, like he always says, I mean, this sounds like a silly thing in the real world, but with athletes, like he's always like, hey, Ann, how you doing? Like people who look you in the eye and call you by your name, that's rare in the sports world. But yeah, he's terrific. Always was a big fan of Steve Young's. Fun to talk to, very smart, very smart. Tim Lincecum was just, I just have such, a kid who had a French bulldog in the clubhouse and could walk on his hands, and pitchers can be really weird and they don't want to talk the day, they don't talk the day before they pitch. Then some of them started to not talk the day before the day they pitch. Then they started to be like, oh, it's Tuesday, I'm pitching Friday, I can't talk to you. Like, Tim would be like chatting it up before he went out on the mound, and he was a lot of fun. So there's been some, and Dusty Baker, one of the all-time just lovable, cool, awesome people to deal with. We've been really lucky. Steve Kerr's another one. He's a gem, super gem. I mean, smart. Buster is, but now Buster is not as much fun for a reporter to talk to. He was always pretty serious, but I think he's kind of really enjoying this new job. So I love Buster. Buster's an ultimate professional, and I've never seen him fail at anything. So yes.
I think, well, everyone in this room recognizes you as the great sports columnist that you are in Mill Valley. You're also, I think everyone recognizes you as a great commentator on life, of someone who, gives your opinion on arts and music. And I know the Abbott brothers consider you a big fan. And when Twitter was a great place, it was wonderful to follow your comments on just life in general. And that's all changed, and I miss that. I wonder, is there another medium that you've gone to voice your, not just sports, but things on arts and culture and politics?
So the question is, if I have gone to another social media website with the demise of the once wonderful Twitter, and the truth is no. I'm on Blue Sky. I keep in touch with my high school friends and my college friends on Facebook, but I don't post the way I used to, and I kind of miss it because it was super fun to, it was one of those things I'm talking about, of bringing people together, like the engaging, if there was a really good sports event going on, or like during the World Cup or something, all the back and forth on Twitter, and then, you get other, like you said, like commentary about restaurants and food, and it was such a lively place, and it just got so toxic. And right now, I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm in a place where I'm just trying to protect my mental health every day. So I am kind of not engaging at all, and I haven't since like October.
Hi, Ann. Thank you for everything you do. I want to get your opinion on the WNBA. Our Valkyries will be starting. So
Yes.
Have you met the coach and the players? And can you give us a little update?
Yeah, so the question is about the Valkyries, who are starting next month, and if I've met the coach and the players. The players are, I haven't met the players. The players are kind of coming together. I had a long sit down with the coach a couple weeks ago. I'm writing a column about her next week. And she is 5'2" and a UCLA Bruin. So we have so much in common, except I'm not a professional basketball coach. And I mean, really the gist of it was kind of a, she probably thought I was a dork, but I'm like, how did you become a basketball coach? You're 5'2". But she's pretty cool. She was one of the first women on a men's bench. She coached with the Clippers, and then she coached with the Aces, which won 2 back-to-back WNBA championship. She's got an interesting backstory, and so I think she's going to be good. I think they're going to be good. I think that the draft is next in a couple weeks, and they have the 5th pick. I don't think that's fair. They're an expansion team. I think they should have the 2nd or 3rd pick, but that's just my opinion. And also I want Kiki Iriafen to come back to the Bay Area, so I wish they had a pick where they could get her back from USC. But I think it's going to be fun. I mean, I can't wait to go to that Caitlin Clark game in June when she comes to town. I don't expect them to be great right off the bat, but I think there's just a lot of talent out there, and I think there's a lot of enthusiasm. Is anyone in here bought season tickets? Yeah, because they've already sold over 10,000 season ticket packages. Like, not just the deposit, the packages. So that's a lot. Chase only holds 18,000, so it's great.
Hi, our kids grew up together. Couple of quick questions. Regarding the Valkyries coach, I think she probably has something in common with the Miami Dolphins football coach. They're both non-players, small guy, right? Miami coach?
Yeah, Mike is one of the funniest coaches in the entire NFL.
Yeah.
He's hilarious.
Yeah.
But no, she was a player. She played at UCLA. She was a starting point guard.
Okay, my question is just an anecdote. Did you come across one of the great performers in Paris, Snoop Dogg?
Yes, I did. A little too often. He was everywhere. It was really, really annoying. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Did you enjoy the Snoop Dogg part of the Olympics? I mean, it was, he was sitting in, he was in the press area at a women's soccer, the gold medal game. Yeah, he was there. That game was weird. So it's the last Saturday of the Olympics. The women are playing the gold medal game. Snoop is in, and everyone's paying attention to Snoop. Then we're in the mixed zone doing our interviews afterwards, and Tom Cruise walks by. And I'm like, he really is as short as everyone says, one. And two, what's Tom Cruise doing here? And then, of course, the whole closing ceremonies handoff to LA. I should have known it was something that corny. But then my friends and I, a couple of colleagues and I sprint. We're all the way over at Roland Garros, where the soccer was being played, near Roland Garros. And we have to get all the way to the other side of the city to the basketball arena in Bercy. And so we're sprinting and we're getting on the metro and we get to the gold medal men's game in the second quarter, and we can't get in because Macron is in the building and all the security. The Olympics are a funny thing. There's all sorts of hurdles and problems that you wouldn't expect.
Let's take one last question.
Oh, is our last question?
Last question?
Wow. Look at you with the last question.
Hey, girlfriend. Hello. So, you touched on two of my favorite people, Steve Kerr, Steph Curry. And Steph has been with him for how many years?
Steve got the job in 2014. He won a championship his very first season as a coach.
Okay, so we're going on 11 years. So there's a reason why the two of them stay together. And can you kind of maybe give us some insight to what that might be to make them such an amazing group?
Well, they won a championship.
Besides the money, because Steve Kerr is not just about the money. There's something about that man.
No, Steve Kerr is the ultimate winner. I mean, he's got 9 championship rings, right? 4 as a coach and 5 as a player.
Right.
He was the ultimate role player, so he doesn't know what it's like to be Steph Curry because he was never a star. But part of it, is they won a championship right out of the gate together. So what are you going to do? You're not going to break it up. But I think they really understand each other. And Steve, I don't know if you've been reading the stories about Jimmy Butler and what he, what kind of drove him out of Miami. And it's the kind of thing that Steve lets his players be grown-ups and grown men who have lives, and he doesn't try and control them. And there was some weird stuff in Miami where they didn't want Jimmy to go be with his kids on a day off, and but so I think there's just mutual respect. They're both very political and smart and interested in, you know, the world at large. They're not just about basketball, which I think is a huge thing that fuels both of them. They're very community-oriented, passionate about, you know, the world around them. So I think they're very similar people.
Do we have time for a couple more questions?
I think we
Do you? Go ahead. Time, Mrs. Speaker?
Yes, plenty of time. As long as the corner bar is still open.
And I was just wondering if you could comment about growing up in Mill Valley, because it seems like it was on the cutting edge of women in sports with Jenny Foley. And I'm just wondering if that was something when you were growing up that made a mark.
It was something. The question is about Jenny Foley, who was the first girl to ever play Little League Baseball. And I just wrote a story for the Mill Valley Historical Society newsletter on Jenny Foley, and I just had a long and lovely conversation with her a couple of weeks ago, and she lives in Tennessee and with her wife, and is terrified of what's happening in the world. And she was a girl. She went to Marin Terrace Marin Terrace Elementary School, which is now a very fancy private school called Longtime. And she grew up right around the corner from where I live now, and she wanted to play Little League, and and they said, you can't, you're not a boy, and her stepdad said you could write a letter to the president, and she wrote Nixon a letter, and anyway, she ended up having to fight with the Mill Valley City Council and talk to people, and yeah, she fought the battle. She was on the cutting edge, and then she got really tired of being the girl who played baseball, so she ended up going to Drake High. So she wasn't in the girl who played baseball there. Yeah.
So this is a little bit more of maybe a business strategy question, but
my forte, business strategy.
That's why I'm asking. But I always wondered what's the difference between San Francisco Chronicle.com and SF-Gate? I don't understand why there's two different entities.
They are completely different entities, both owned by Hearst. The difference between sfchronicle.com and SF-Gate. SF-Gate is clickbait, which you might notice. None of our stuff goes on SF-Gate. It used to years ago, but it hasn't for maybe a decade. So please go to sfchronicle.com and click on my column, because they count the clicks.
Thank you. Great talk and a great place to end. Anne said she'd stay around a little while for your individual questions, and we have lovely homemade cookies for refreshments. We hope you'll join us and enjoy our building here, and thank you so much for joining us. Oh, I also want to thank our wonderful AV team and the Civics and Conservation team for all their preparation.